In the summer of 1939, a schoolteacher named Vera is looking for seasonal work. She visits an employment agency where a recruiter named Isaac offers her a position as an assistant to the Owens family. He mentions she was specifically requested by them. Vera is hesitant, unsure she's suited for the job, until she sees that the Owens have already sent an advance payment, which makes her reconsider and accept the offer. Meanwhile, Isaac's secretary is hard at work typing invitations for an upcoming gathering hosted by the Owens. Elsewhere in the city, a radio broadcaster is paid to record some lines, supposedly for a stage production. A few days later, Vera is on a train en route to her new position. She can't shake a troubling image in her head, a rope hanging ominously from the window. Her unease worsens when she notices a man named Philip staring at her. Wanting to escape his gaze, she moves through the train and passes a businessman named William before finally settling in with Lawrence, a retired judge. On a road not far from the tracks, Dr. Edward is trying to drive cautiously but is nearly forced off the road by the reckless Anthony, who speeds past him without care. Eventually, all these individuals, Vera, Philip, William, Lawrence, Edward, and Anthony, along with General John, converge at a dock where they'll be ferried to Soldier Island, the site of a mysterious party hosted by the Owens. Upon arrival, they're puzzled to learn the Owens aren't there yet. The butler Thomas and his wife Ethel greet them, explaining that the hosts will arrive later. They also introduce the last two guests who had arrived earlier, Anthony and Emily. The guests begin settling into their rooms. William pulls out a notebook and jots down details about the others, already having a complete list of all attendees. Philip secretly takes a gun from his suitcase and stashes it in the nightstand. Meanwhile, Anthony indulges in an illegal upper, clearly enjoying himself. As they explore their rooms, each guest notices a framed poem titled 10 Soldiers, which tells the tale of 10 men dining together, each dying one by one in various tragic ways. Curious, Vera wanders through the house and eventually ends up downstairs, where she's confronted by Ethel. Vera explains she was hired as an assistant, but Ethel informs her that the Owens explicitly instructed the staff to treat Vera as a guest. That evening, dinner is announced with the sound of a gong, and the guests gather in the dining room. At the center of the table sits a display of 10 figurines, each representing one of the soldiers from the poem. The meal is lively with conversation, though there's still no sign of the Owens. Thomas mentions there's no phone on the island to contact them. Talk eventually shifts to cars, and Dr. Edward realizes that Anthony is the reckless driver who ran him off the road earlier. Anthony denies it, sparking a heated exchange, though the other guests intervene before it escalates. Anthony offers a clearly insincere apology to smooth things over. After dinner, the quiet atmosphere is suddenly shattered when a strange voice blares from a hidden speaker system, addressing each guest by name and accusing them of murder, even listing the names of their victims. The guests are stunned and outraged, demanding an explanation for the horrific accusations. Thomas, the butler, leads them to the same room Vera had found earlier and reveals that the voice came from a pre-recorded gramophone. As the guests process this, the voice continues, accusing Thomas and Ethel as well. Overwhelmed by the stress, Ethel has a panic attack and faints. Thomas carries her to their room, where Dr. Edward examines her and prepares a mild sedative to help her rest. Once Edward leaves, Ethel awakens in distress, terrified their secret has been exposed. Thomas urges her to stay quiet, trying to keep them both calm. Shortly after, the guests regroup in the living room to discuss the accusations. Thomas explains that the Owens had left detailed instructions asking him to play the recording after dinner, but he had no idea what it contained. He insists that he and his wife are innocent. However, a flashback shows the truth. Thomas had smothered their previous employer with a pillow, while Ethel silently stood by and watched. The others begin defending themselves against the allegations. Anthony and Emily both deny any knowledge of the incident they're accused of. Edward claims the patient named in his accusation died due to routine surgical complications. General John says his victim was a soldier who died in combat. Lawrence admits he sentenced a man to death who was believed to be innocent, but insists he had additional evidence as a judge. William says the man named in his accusation choked to death on his own vomit in jail, implying it wasn't his fault. Vera reveals she had worked as a governess, and the child she cared for drowned in the sea after sneaking out to swim unsupervised. Each claims their incident was either an accident or misunderstood, except for Philip, who doesn't even try to deny it. He calmly admits to killing 21 men in Africa, insisting it was part of his job and that he's no different than any other soldier. The others are horrified and call him a monster, but Philip remains unmoved. This spurs Anthony to suddenly remember the names mentioned in his accusation. He confesses that they were two children playing in the dark. He ran them over with his car. But in his memory, it's clear it wasn't nighttime at all. It was broad daylight, and he was driving recklessly without a care. After sharing his story, Anthony casually raises his glass for another drink. Moments later, he begins to choke violently. The other guests rush to lower him to the floor, but when Edward examines him, he grimly confirms Anthony is dead. The men carry Anthony's corpse back to his bedroom, where they stumble upon his stash of illicit stimulants. William refuses to let anyone hide the evidence, insisting that what they have now is effectively a crime scene, agreeing there's nothing more they can do until morning. Everyone retires for the night. Ethel's sleep is haunted by flashbacks to the smothering of her previous employer, and the nightmare ends with a soft, unexplained knock at her door. Elsewhere, Edward dreams of the botched surgery that still stains his conscience. Blood everywhere, the patient slipping away. He bolts awake at dawn to find Thomas standing over him, begging him to check on Ethel. By the time Edward reaches her room, he can only pronounce her dead. She's been gone for hours. Philip decides he's not taking chances and slips his revolver into his pocket before heading to breakfast. In the hallway, he meets William, who is leaning over Anthony's body. A quick sniff tells William something new. Anthony's breath reeks of cyanide. Edward runs into Vera and follows her to the dining room, where she points out that only 8 soldier figurines remain. Edward brushes her off, and when he leaves, Vera has a sudden vision of Olivia, her former employer, and the day on the beach when little Cyril drowned. She remembers Olivia scolding the boy for wanting to swim beyond his ability, Hugo's arrival soon after, and her instant infatuation with him. The guests gather for breakfast prepared by Thomas. Vera again raises the missing figurines. Everyone swears they never touched them. She argues that a young, healthy man like Anthony doesn't simply die overnight. Noticing Edward's medical bag, she asks why he brought drugs to a holiday if he wasn't expecting to work. Edward concedes he came to treat Mrs. Owen. Pressed further, he agrees to have his case searched, but demands that Lawrence's luggage be inspected too, explaining he once saw the judge in his clinic's cancer ward. Both bags yield nothing more than mild sedatives. Irritated, Edward flings Vera's own suitcase open in retaliation. Afterward, Philip corners Vera in private, casually admitting he killed those men for diamonds. He asks for her real story, but she sticks to her version. She loved Cyril and nearly drowned trying to rescue him. Upstairs, General John methodically packs, replaying the day his friend Henry died. During the war, John had discovered his wife's letters hidden in Henry's jacket. The two had been having an affair. When John next saw Henry, he acted cordial, until Henry turned away and John shot him in the back. Meanwhile, Philip questions Thomas for more background. Thomas explains that he and Ethel have been on the island for a week and have seen no one except the sailor who drops off supplies. Philip is convinced the Owens must still be hiding somewhere on the island, and William volunteers to help him search. As they hike the grounds, William describes how his prisoner took a bad fall in his cell, though the truth is William had beaten the man to death. Elsewhere, General John steps outside to get some air. When Vera checks on him, he admits his wife died of influenza after the war, and he regrets denying her happiness. He also believes the supply boat will never come. They're stranded. After Vera leaves, John briefly sees a vision of Henry's ghost haunting him. Inside the house, a tipsy Edward joins Philip and William. They hear a noise in Anthony's old room. Philip bursts in with his revolver drawn, only to find Thomas searching for a folding camp bed. He refuses to sleep beside his wife's corpse. Unlike the guests, Thomas won't be allowed to leave when, or if, the boat arrives. Meanwhile, Vera helps Emily wind her skein of wool and finally hears Emily's story. Years ago, she took in a foundling girl as a maid and taught her everything she knew. When the girl got into trouble, Emily refused to help, and the girl subsequently took her own life. After Vera goes inside for tea, Emily notices an odd flock of birds circling. She approaches for a closer look and discovers they're hovering above General John, who now lies dead on the ground. Moments later, the men carry John's body indoors, and William declares it an unmistakable murder. Vera checks the dining room display. One more soldier figurine has disappeared. Racked with guilt over Cyril's drowning and terrified by the mounting deaths, Vera walks down to the shoreline intending to drown herself, but Lawrence intervenes and coaxes her back to the house. That evening, the remaining guests convene. They begin by interrogating Philip about his firearm. Philip explains he wasn't technically invited. Isaac hired him on the Owens instructions, paying him handsomely to be a troubleshooter if needed. Lawrence was lured by a letter mentioning an old friend. Emily came because Mrs. Owen admired her educational work. William received word that someone would arrive under false pretenses and a police inspector would be required, complete with a guest list supplied by Owen, and Edward believed he was to treat Mrs. Owen as her physician. Every invitation was delivered by post. None of them has actually met Owens. At that point, Lawrence notices something. The letters were all signed to Owen, a homophone for unknown. He concludes it's a clue. The murderer must be one of them. Meanwhile, Thomas discovers liver and kidneys missing from a larder. The supply boat never appears, and as darkness falls, each survivor retreats to a locked bedroom for the night. Emily prays for protection before bed, but her fear intensifies when she hallucinates the ghost of her former maid silently appearing beside her. The next morning, Edward frantically rings the gong, rousing the rest of the house. He announces that Thomas has been murdered, his body found in a pool of blood. The weapon, an axe, another chilling match with the Tin Soldiers poem, further confirming Vera's earlier suspicions. While Philip and William move Thomas's body, Vera quietly prepares coffee for everyone, though Emily refuses to drink, too paranoid to trust it. Meanwhile, Edward corners Lawrence and, after apologizing for revealing his illness, proposes they form an alliance. Lawrence agrees, seeing the logic in working together. Later, while walking through the house, Vera spots something alarming, though we're not shown what, and immediately checks the figurines. Another one is gone. She rings the gong again, summoning the others, and leads them to Emily's room, where they find her dead, stabbed in the neck with a knitting needle, mimicking the bee's sting from the poem. After placing Emily's body in her bed, Philip returns to his room, only to find his gun is missing. Enraged, he calls for a meeting, pointing out that his room had been locked, meaning someone must possess a master key. Accusations fly, and tensions spike until William offers an alibi. He was in the bathroom due to constipation. Oddly enough, this diffuses the moment. The guests decide to search every room, even going so far as to strip towels or robes to prove they're not hiding the weapon. Vera dons her old swimsuit, the same one she wore the day Cyril drowned, and recalls how the boy once said he wished Vera would marry Hugo and become his aunt. Gazing into the mirror, Vera finally notices something unsettling, a strange hook embedded in the ceiling. Later, Vera encounters Philip in only a towel, and, in a moment of silent vulnerability, she loosens her robe, a subtle gesture of flirtation. They agree to start using first names, unaware that Edward is secretly watching them. Having cleared all the bedrooms, they move on to search the rest of the house, but again find nothing. For dinner, they eat from canned goods directly, fearing tampered food. Meanwhile, the camera reveals the missing gun and key cleverly hidden inside the mouth of a bearskin rug. Later that evening, as they share drinks, Vera reflects again on Cyril and a conversation she once had with Olivia. Olivia had confided that Cyril was unexpected. She hadn't known she was pregnant when her husband died, and Hugo had been poised to inherit everything. Cyril's birth had shattered all of Hugo's prospects. Still anxious, Vera announces she'd like to make tea, and the others insist on going with her, not wanting anyone to be left alone. While everyone waits in the kitchen for Vera's tea water to boil, the conversation shifts to Judge Lawrence and the many death sentences he has handed down. Lawrence admits that for every man he condemned, he stood witness at the execution. He considered it his duty. The recording's voice had singled him out for Seaton's hanging, a case the newspapers called a miscarriage of justice. But Lawrence reveals he once received Seaton's private diaries, pages filled with unspeakable crimes. Seaton was different, Lawrence recalls, because he refused the hood and stared straight at the bench as the noose tightened, a stare that still visits Lawrence in the small hours. The word haunt makes Vera glance toward the doorway, and, for an instant, she sees Cyril watching her, an echo that melts into a memory of her kissing Hugo on the beach. Later, Lawrence retires to the drawing room to read, and Vera heads upstairs. While she washes her face, Cyril's reflection materializes behind her. A moment later, a hand lunges over the sink, clawing at her throat. Panicked flashes of Cyril struggling in the water flood her mind before Philip and Edward burst in, finding her collapsed on the floor. Vera insists it was a panic spell, and when William offers brandy, she refuses, wary of anything open. Philip volunteers to fetch a sealed bottle. They regroup to calm their nerves, discussing the strange hook in Vera's ceiling. But someone notices Lawrence never responded to Vera's scream. They sprint downstairs and find him slumped in his armchair, shot through the head. Another scene lifted straight from the poem. His body is carried to a vacant bedroom. And while accusations ricochet around the hallway, Vera spots that yet another soldier figurine has vanished. Dreading the idea of sitting sober until the next murder, they declare a macabre party. They drain brandy, swallow fistfuls of Anthony's uppers, and replay the accusatory gramophone record at full volume. On the makeshift dance floor, Philip pulls Vera close. Across the room, Edward murmurs to William that the young pair might be conspiring. Philip whispers that he'll keep Vera safe, then escorts her to her room, where they spend the night together. Elsewhere, William lies awake, replaying the night his prisoner died. The boy had merely been accused of spying on men in a public lavatory. William imagines unlocking the cell, letting the youth walk free. Yet even in fantasy, his fists close around the boy's throat, and he beats him to death. A faint noise snaps him back. He opens his door to see Edward hurrying downstairs. William bangs on Philip's door, rouses him, and together they follow. Left alone again, Vera drifts in a memory. The hospital ward where she lay after nearly drowning with Cyril. Hugo came once cold distant. He told her she was dismissed. Without Cyril, there was no post to fill. He left a thick envelope of money and walked out, refusing ever to see her again. Some time later, Philip and William return empty-handed. They haven't found Edward. But back in Philip's room, the missing gun is lying on the bed, and yet another figurine has vanished from the dining table. The tally of deaths and soldier dolls continues to shrink. Vera, remembering the next verse in the Tin Soldiers poem, says it involves a red herring, and wonders if Edward is still alive and orchestrating everything. After all, he was the one who suggested the party. William, meanwhile, spirals into a breakdown, wondering aloud if they're all already dead and in hell. He finally admits what everyone suspected. He did kill his prisoner, beating the boy to death. Philip calms him down, trying to keep some order. Later, while searching again for Edward, William sees a bear charging toward him, but it's no animal. It's a person using the bearskin rug, which had been hiding both the gun and master key. Meanwhile, Vera and Philip go to the cliffside to start a signal fire, hoping to attract a passing boat. There, they realize William never followed them. Returning to the house, they find William's lifeless body beneath the bear rug, perfectly matching the poem's line about the zoo bear. There are now only 2 figurines left. Back at the cliff, they notice something on the rocks where the tide has gone out. It's Edward's corpse. Vera asks Philip to help move the body, but as soon as he turns his back, she steals the gun from his coat, convinced he's the killer. Philip tries to reason with her and reach for the gun, but she shoots him in the shoulder. Panicked, Vera empties the rest of the bullets, killing Philip. In shock, she spirals into a breakdown, remembering the day she testified in court about Cyril's death, claiming it was an accident. She told everyone she had tried to save him, and all believed her, except Hugo. In a private moment, Hugo confronted her, pointing out she was an excellent runner. He didn't believe she ran as fast as she could to save Cyril. Vera denied it, but her memory now betrays her. Cyril hadn't snuck off. She had told him to go swimming, and she had delayed just long enough to let him drown, so Hugo could inherit the fortune. Suddenly, Cyril's ghost appears and silently leads Vera back to the house. In her bedroom, she sees the ceiling hook now holds a noose, just like in the poem. She steps onto a chair, ready to end things, only to hesitate when the door opens and Lawrence walks in. Vera gasps in horror, losing balance and kicking the chair by accident. Now barely able to breathe, She clings to life long enough to hear Lawrence reveal the truth. There are no Owens. He invented them. The whole thing was his design, a twisted form of justice to punish the unpunished. He had faked his own death using the organs he'd stolen from the fridge, planting them as a decoy. Edward had lied to cover for him because of their earlier alliance. Lawrence explains that Seaton's diaries were so vile that they awakened something inside him. When Seaton stared at him in the final moment, Lawrence realized they were the same. With his terminal illness, Lawrence had nothing to lose. He wanted to craft a perfect crime, one that would leave 10 bodies and no murderer, just the mysterious, non-existent Yuen Owen. Vera tells him there are no bullets left, suggesting they stage their deaths and blame it all on Philip. But Lawrence reveals the last bullet is still in his pocket, the one he removed to fake his death. He then pushes the chair out from under Vera, killing her as the poem dictates. Afterward, Lawrence replaces all 10 soldier figurines in their original positions and meticulously sets the dining room with drinks and chairs, as though the guest had just finished a final toast. He sits down and uses the gun one last time, completing the poem and leaving behind a room of bodies and a mystery with no killer.